community is composed of the collective stories, history, and heritage of its people. It's important that everyone has the opportunity to share their story and be heard. The Community Oral History Project creates community space for people to come together to share and learn about the history, heritage, and traditions of our communities, highlighting what we share in common. Community can be defined by location, or community can be considered a collection of people bound together by shared experiences. My name is Emily Jones Hudson, and here are these stories.
Hi, I'm Gwen Johnson. I was born in Whitesburg, Kentucky at the ARH Hospital, which at the time was the Miners Hospital. My daddy was a coal miner, and I currently live in Hemphill, the community I was raised. And I was born 5/15/1958.
All right. So give us a little background about yourself. Tell me about your parents, their names, and what they did.
Okay, so my dad was James Johnson, James Webster Johnson, and his family moved to this community in the 1940s. They just moved right across the mountain and they came to work for the Elkhorn Coal Corporation over here. And so my grandpa, both my grandpas, retired from the mines that was in this community, and my dad got he became disabled, but he also got blackballed because of his UMWA organizing activities. I had a uncle who got killed in that mines. One of my mom's brothers got killed in that same old mines. When I was a little kid, he got electrocuted, and then a little bit later on, she had two more brothers that got killed with the same rock. And then I had my dad's brother got his arm cut off in the coal mines. And then when he was 27, my little brother, around the late 80s, got killed in a rock fall in the Golden Oak mine. So we've had a lot of mine tragedy.
Yeah. What was your mom's name?
My mom was Mabel Lee Fleming Johnson, and she was one of the very first to graduate from high school in this community. And she graduated from Fleming Neon. My dad had about a sixth grade education. And so mom was a high school graduate. And then she went to work after she graduated high school at the Whitesburg ARH hospital and worked in the cafeteria there until she married my dad, and then she became a homemaker.
Okay. So what about your grandparents on your dad's side and your grandparents on your mom's side?
So they had been, both my grandpas had been moonshiners. And just, grubbing out a living, kind of self sustained farm. So mom's dad was John Fleming, and her mom was Bessie Stewart Fleming. And so they moved over here, as I said before, in the 40s, and brought their family. My mom would tell a story about a wagon that they came across the mountain. The community here is right adjacent to Pike County, and they came across the mountain from the Long Fork of Virgie with a wagon load of belongings, 12 little kids, and a cow and some pigs and chickens. And came, mom said they were coming to the promised land where there was running water and electric lights in the coal camp. And I've often thought about that with all the mine tragedy, how much of a promised land was it. And then my dad's folks were, my grandpa, again, had been growing corn and making moonshine, and came over here late in his life, because he was older than my mom's dad. And he lived right here in this community and mined coal until the mines worked out. And then he died at 94. So just lived right up here in the camps all those years.
What was
I grew
his
up.
name?
His name was Ashley Johnson, and my grandma was Thelma.
Okay.
Thelmy, as they called her.
Okay. And tell me a little bit about her.
Well, she was a quilt maker and a herb doctor and all the things. So I grew up right around her knees, and she taught me, herb healing, herbal medicine from the time I could walk. And she made quilts, and my grandpa he dug herbs and bark, and I can still remember how their house smelled, because he'd be drying out the herbs and the bark, like behind the heater and the cook stove. And it just had a real special smell, especially when he was drying out sassafras, because that smells really good.
Yeah. Okay. So, I see. Now, what year were you born?
1958.
58. Okay. So tell me a little bit about the community. What was going on in the community as you were growing up?
Well, the coal mining industry has always been a roller coaster. And so in times of peace, there'd be a bust, and in times of war, there'd be a boom. And so I can remember the times when everybody was flying high and, had it pretty good. We didn't know we were poor, because everybody was living alike. And then, when there come a bust and everybody's out of work, we'd live on commodities and what we could raise in the garden. And it's just always been that kind of thing, And even today, with this whole food stamp debacle, SNAP benefit debacle that we're going through right now, it just brings all that back for me, because it's just the way it's always been.
Okay. What about school life?
Okay, so I went 8 years right here in this building. My mommy went to school here from the time she was 10 years old till she graduated from the 8th grade. And then my kids went to school here until they shut the school down. I had one that was in the 4th grade, and one that was in the 7th grade when they shut the school down. So, we got a long history here. And then after a while, it stood vacant when they consolidated the schools. And we kind of rallied around and went and talked to the county judge executive, and they gave us use of the building, which is still county owned. And they let us have the community center here. Before that, it was up the road in the back of the old fountain. So we set up shop and became a 501c3 in 1996. And this organization has been operating as a 501c3 since then.
Okay, now what was the name of the school at that
Hemphill Grade School.
Hemphill Grade School, okay.
Yeah.
What about high school?
Well, then I went to Fleming High School. My mom went there, and my kids went there. And they both graduated from there. I've got 2 daughters. And so, we've just got a long history here and deep roots. And then my family is about 8 generations within a 10-mile radius right here. So, some of the early settlers that were running from whatever they was running from that came into these woods, were it was some of my ancestors. And then the coal companies came and took the land, and you know that story, so I won't even go into that.
Yeah. Okay. So what growing up here in the community during the time of segregation and desegregation. What was it like in this community?
Well, by then, all the black families had moved out of this particular community. Now, we still had a few black students at the high school, and the section of the camp up in Fleming, where, the coal company had sold off their holdings. And so, in selling off the holdings, they segregated the people just like they always did. And the coal companies were absentee owned. So, it wasn't anybody that lived here who owned the coal companies. But I remember when all the turmoil was going on. Oh, this is going to make me cry. And I'm sorry, Pastor Emily. But, the kids were hearing and seeing what was on the news and hearing talk at home about all the turmoil that was going on in places like Chicago and off from here, and the riots and all that was going on. And there was I never will forget it. We just had a handful of black students. And Tonsillara Baxter is a name just written on my heart. And there were some white students that picked on Tonsillara. And I was a freshman. And Tonsillara was a little bit ahead of me in school. And these were older kids picking on her. And I remember they rolled in the floor and fought in the hallway at the high school. It was in the upstairs hallway. The office was downstairs. And so the fight took place in the upstairs hallway. And I knew that I should help her. But I was scared, and I didn't help her. And it's always haunted me all these years. But I got a chance a few years back. I had went to Pastor Steve's church, and he was having a revival. And lo and behold, there was Tonsillara. And I apologized to her, and she said, "Well, Gwen, don't worry about that." She said, "That's so far in the past." But it just always haunted me, because I knew I should have done the right thing. And I was scared, being younger, and I don't know, it was just a really scary time. But the black students that were at high school were precious people, and they just, grew up and moved away, probably to chase work like a lot of my other classmates, because, work kind of dried up around here. And, a lot of people have had to leave to survive. But they still come and visit sometimes. And maybe every now and then, we'll catch a glimpse of them and get to catch up a little bit.
Okay. So, Fleming, Neon, McRoberts, Jenkins, all this area. How does, because now I understand Fleming Neon is no longer Fleming Neon, but it's Fleming and Neon. So
well, it's still Fleming Neon.
Okay, talk about the relationship between these communities.
Well, so Hemphill is a coal camp, and Fleming is a coal camp, and McRoberts is a coal camp, and then there's Jenkins with the coal camps over there. There's Dunham, and there's Burdine, and so this is the coal mining end of the county. I'll say it like that. So Neon, as I understand it, was a little boom town that grew up around the coal industry. So there were merchants that came in that were not attached to the coal company, but they came and set up shop nearby to capitalize on what business they could. Now the coal companies issued their wages in script, so they had exchanges where you could exchange your script for money. Of course, you probably lost a certain percentage of it, and I don't know what that was. But the merchants in Neon, so Neon like gets flooded when there's any kind of a flood. It's the first thing to get flooded. And my theory about that is the coal companies kind of engineered these camps till they don't get hit as hard when a flood comes. But Neon was a boomtown that was thrown up just about overnight with no thought to longevity. And so, and somewhere along the line, and I can't tell you when exactly that was, probably for government money or something, they have combined those two communities to make a bigger population, to be more money because of per capita or whatever. Is my theory about it. Now I've not asked anybody that, but that's what I think. But the creek right down here below us, Neon is about a mile and a quarter down the road, down the creek. You know, the creek's flowing this way. And the creek bottlenecks down there. And when it bottlenecks right in front of the fire department, it has nowhere to go but right down the middle of town. And it gets it every time. And then coming out of Mac Roberts, it bottlenecks again when it gets to town, and right there at the post office, it wipes it out and goes right down through the middle of town again. So there were churches down there during that flood in 22 that had 11 feet of water in them. So, and then, so another thing I need to say about that is there's always been these athletic rivalries between Fleming and Jenkins and Whitesburg. Not so much Letcher, which had its own high school too at the time. And all these little grade schools, you know, Neon had a grade school, Hemphill had one. And when I was here, it was, we didn't have a kindergarten, but it was 1 through 8. By the time my kids got here, it was kindergarten through 8. And then, you know, they not segregated, but consolidated and made middle schools and elementary schools out of all the surrounding. But all of them had a ball team. So they were out for blood. When it came down to it was like, we're going to beat them down there at Neon, you know, like, hard rivalries. And then the high schools were like that too. I remember I was in the marching band, and when we were going to play Jenkins, we go over there and throw eggs and toilet paper and sometimes rocks if we could get by with it. And I remember one time we had this big hot ball game, and we was like, we're going to beat them, you know, and I went over there and did that, and my parents found out about it. And when I got home, they grounded me. I couldn't go nowhere for about 2 weeks, not to the ball game either, and I cried all night. But I shouldn't have been out getting into meanness anyway. But yeah, these rivalries were real, buddy.
Yeah.
And you know, my brother was I mentioned my brother got killed in the mines. He was a football player. Yeah. They was out for blood too. It was funny as it could be.
Yeah, these
now that I look
mountain
back on it.
robberies, that's nothing to joke about.
Oh no, they're serious.
Yeah, yeah. Tell me about, is there any family traditions in your family that been passed down? You mentioned something about quilting. So is there there's quilting and the other family traditions is passed down?
Yeah, so mostly it's it's hunting for the men and fishing. And so they've always done that. Every Thanksgiving, they were going rabbit hunting before daylight, and then they'd come in from the hunt and we'd have dinner on the table because Mommy always insisted we have it on the table at 12 o'clock. And they'd come in, from hunting, and then they've always went squirrel hunting in the fall. They still do it. So I knew how to fry rabbit and squirrel and make gravy on them from early age, And then deer hunting in the fall. They'll take off for about a week, take off work. The family might not get a vacation, but there's a deer hunting trip. And then, they just, we always supplement the table with the wild game. I've grown up on it, love it so much. We cook Thanksgiving and Christmas dinner, community dinner here now. And it's become, somebody gives me a big haunch of deer meat every time. And we have that. And people will come in, it's never had it before. Oh, no, I don't like it. And I'll say, well, just try it. Because you got to know how to cook it. Yeah. And we have cooked it so much, you wouldn't know it's not beef if I cook it. And so there's those traditions of making those dishes, We got a gingerbread tradition from my granny. We used to raise huge gardens, and I would get so mad, Pastor Emily, thinking, why in the world is Daddy making us work like this in this hot sun to give everything we have away? He gives it all away. And I'd say, but he didn't really, because we canned it and dried beans, and we had a tater hoe under the house and put cabbage and apples and taters in, in a big winter store of canned food, and freeze some of it. And, we always killed a pig in the fall and a beef if we could get one, and then the wild game. So we always had food. But he always shared what we had. And I think, why in the world do we have to do all this work so he can give that away? But now I understand. Because I do a lot of work so that I can feed people. I understand it now. But I didn't as a kid. I'd get so mad.
All right. So actually, those experiences that you had doing those kind of things is help you doing what you're doing now in the Black Sheep.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me, how is that related?
Well, we don't let nobody leave here hungry. And, I'd have nightmares if I thought anybody was hungry that left here, unless they want to be hungry or dying or something. And so just the helping, the trying to help, because we get people who come to us out of incarceration sometimes, and they don't have nothing. They might have an outfit when they get here, and we try to give them gainful employment, try to teach them on the job skills that they can take. If they go somewhere else, they can get a job, doing that. And I have cooked all my life, but at one time, I thought, I can't do this all my life. It's too hard. And so I went back to school. When my oldest daughter went to school, I went to school. And so I got all this education under my belt, went to work for University of Kentucky, retired from them this past January. But all I really ever wanted to do was just cook and feed people. Even after I got that education, I wanted to do the same old thing. And so I think to be able to teach somebody that, because I've had them come in here and say, well, I couldn't even fix ramen noodles, and now look what I'm doing. I'm making bread, I'm making this, I'm making that. That's really rewarding to get to pass those skills on, and to help them, Maybe their car's not tagged, and they, maybe they're getting a car and they don't have insurance. They don't have the money to tag it. and I just muster everything I can to try to get them on their feet. And, buddy, it pays off.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got one that she just came in to work a while ago. She was one of the ones that couldn't fix ramen noodles. And now she's working like 3 jobs. She bought herself a brand new car. She can't bear to quit here, so she works a few hours on Friday evening. And she is going to school. And so I try to encourage them to get into taking some classes. I tell them, if I can do it, you can do it. And if you need help, we'll get help and whatever. So there's so many things that I got so mad at my dad over that I find myself doing that very same thing. And my mom too.
Yeah. All right. Now tell me about the quilting tradition.
Okay, so my my grandpa used to say that my granny would go spend all this money on good cloth just to cut it up in little pieces and sew it back together. And so, but I used to go with her as a little child. There was a secondhand store, thrift store down at Neon, and she would go in there and she would go through those clothes and she would find pretty fabrics. She'd bring them home and cut the button blanket off of it, cut the buttons off the blanket and put them in a jar. So there was always this big can of buttons that us kids played with and learned to sew buttons with and this and that. And then she would just turn them into quilts that would knock your eyes out, just with that thrifted material. So she didn't always buy new material. But we've done a lot of quilting here, and had quilt classes and this and that. And before we started this bakery, I used to do some quilting myself. But there's only so many hours in the day. And my hands are far from being idle to be able to pick something up and work on it,
Do you think is that something that you've tried to pass down to your kids?
Well, we talk about it and we have these quilt classes and I try to get them to come. But I got one that works all the time and the other ones, busy raising kids and whatever. So they've not picked it up. I tried to get them to pick up musical instruments too, and they never would do that either. It's like the thing you want them to do, they won't do.
Yeah. Is music in your family?
Shape note singing. What always was, because I was raised in the Church of Christ where they don't allow musical instruments. And I always wanted a guitar. So I was grown before I got my hands on one, because my people always said if you had a guitar, you'd either play in church or play in a bar, and they didn't want me to do neither one. So I got me one, and I played in church, and I played in the bar too.
Okay, all right. Anything else you want to share?
No, not really. I just appreciate somebody wanting to hear my story.
Yeah.
We have a mural out here on the side of the building that we took a swath of this picture to make the mural. And SEKY painted it for us. It depicts miners from different cultures, and we didn't want all European white faces in the mural. So we pulled the census for 1930 and found out that 31 nationalities had come to work in the coal industry here in Letcher County in the 1930s. And probably came prior to that, but the census for that period reflects it. On the census, they listed occupation, and they also listed country of origin. There was one black female who had listed in that census as working for the coal company. And we don't know if she was a miner, in fact, or if what facet of the coal industry that she worked in for the company. But we truly are a melting pot. When we were hanging the mural out here. The mural was painted on panels in the back room during the COVID-19 pandemic. And we got the panels out and got carpenters to finally hang them on the side of the building. And we were out here, and there was about a 50-some-year-old man who was standing out there watching the mural being hung. And he said, "There's a black man on that, Miss Gwen. Did black people ever live in Hemphill?" And I said, "Yes, they sure did. There are 2 black cemeteries here, and lots of black folks worked in the mines up here. But I believe that the coal companies had racist agendas, not as much the people as the coal companies. And I believe that they just, segregated the people, even the selling off of the properties. When they sold off their holdings, they still segregated."
Well, my name is Virginia Holland. I was actually born in Alexandria, Virginia. My parents both was from this area. My dad was from Mac Roberts, which is a little small town, coal camp, whatever you want to call it, town. And then my mom was from Clintwood, Virginia. And when they got married, they moved to Fairfax, Virginia. And he worked in the school system as a maintenance man, custodian. And Mom stayed home with us for, I guess, probably the first 7 year, I guess. And then she started working as a cook. And I don't know what made them decide to move back here. But the summer between my 4th and 5th grade year, we moved back here. Dad wanted to come home. Mm-hmm. And by that time, my mama and papa both was home. Papa had retired from the mines. And it was a big adjustment to go from kind of the city to here. But it didn't take me long to enjoy the things that, my cousins was doing. I had a little bit of problem with school the 5th grade year because most of what they was teaching I had already learned in the 4th grade. We were more advanced in our education than here. I actually went to school here my 5th grade year. Mom and Dad had rented a house up in what's called Potter's Fork, and then they bought a house in Mac Roberts. But my dad went back in the mines, and when I was in probably the 7th, 8th grade, Mom started working as a cook at the nursing home over at Jenkins. And she done that for years, even after I got married. But in this area, there wasn't a lot for teenagers to do, or kids for that matter. I mean, we played in the creeks and caught lightning bugs at night and just played in the smokehouse. I mean, a lot different from when I was, in Virginia. Up there, I was on the soccer team, and we done academics even in the grade schools there. And so it was an adjustment, but it was one I come to love. But I did get married the summer between my junior and senior year in high school. I got pregnant, and the boy that I married was like 3 years older than me. He was working for the school system, and he ended up going back to school and becoming a truck driver. He drove a coal truck. In 5 years of marriage, we had 3 kids, and I just wasn't happy. I guess when you marry and you love them, but you don't love them the way you should, and the family kind of pushes you to get married because of the situation. And I which he offered for me to go on my senior trip. My senior prom, but my baby was born in March and I didn't want to leave her for a minute. So I kind of felt tied down and I divorced him. And in, like I said, 5 years, I had 3 small children. I was faced with starting college and working as a single mom. And there wasn't a lot of job opportunities around here. In fact, back then, and I laugh and tell my girls about it, I think minimum wage was like $2.15. And that's all I could do because I had no education. I ended up doing a work study program through college, but it was just 10 hours a week. And because my ex-husband paid child support, I didn't qualify for the programs that a lot of the other boys and girls, that was going to school. But I was blessed. That was when they had put Southeast Community College in it at Whitesburg. So I didn't have to travel far, and I was able to arrange my classes around my kids' school schedule. I ended up having to take 2 night classes, but my mom babysitted, for me to do that. But it was very hard. But, where there's a will, there's a way. You find it. You was talking about the history. One of my night classes was Kentucky history, and I think out of every course I took for college, I enjoyed that more because I learned a lot that my grandparents hadn't told me, that my parents hadn't told me, and you still forget a lot, My grandmother, I called her Mama Hazel. She was a very big part of my life. With Mom working, I'd get off to school and I'd walk up to her house, and we would sit. She had a back porch that was screened in. We would sit and talk, and she done a lot of, I guess you would call them the folklore, or the remedies. She talked about marking the fogs on the calendar in August that determines your snowfall in the winter. The thunders in February determined your last frost, before you started playing in the garden. And I learned to can. I learned to cook, to dry beans. I didn't do a lot where the smokehouse was concerned with curing the hogs and stuff. That was more the guy's thing to do. But now I have 5 children. I have 3 by my first marriage and 2 by my current marriage. And the one thing that I stressed with my kids was to get an education. And with the girls, I said, you may never need it. But then again, your husband might get killed and you're faced with what I was faced with. So I have, my oldest daughter, Jessica, is over Whitesburg Hospital. She's the kind of like the DON there. And then my daughter, Leslie, works at the pharmacy. My daughter, Joetta, is an attorney in Mississippi. And then my son is a service advisor over at Freedom Ford. He took diesel mechanics, but he prefers diagnosing and all that over the diesel mechanics. And then my youngest one, Hannah, she just graduated in August from her nurse practitioner courses, specializing in mental health and addiction. And she's got quite a few little certifications. I don't know if it's where she was the baby and I had more time with her, or if she was just more eager, but she done, and we're blessed when they built the new high school. Our children has the opportunity to get a lot of certifications before they even get out of school. So she had her CNAs, her medical assistant, phlebotomy, and something to do with EKGs. But she started working at Mountain Comprehensive Health Care fresh out of high school as a medical assistant. She worked full-time doing that and got her RN license. She went on, didn't stop, got her master's in nursing, and then the degrees that she's got now. She took some courses that Mountain Comp had got a grant for, and become the 13th nurse in the state of Kentucky to be certified in addiction and recovery. She has certification for autism and peds, and she's really excited with her new career, and I'm proud of all my children.
Yeah, sounds like it.
But I worked hard to get them where they're at.
Okay. One of the things that, we talk about passing down traditions, family traditions, and it sounds like you're passing down that the importance of education. Why do you think that is so important that we pass that down to our kids in the next generation, especially in rural areas like this?
Well, I know I was always really big on knowing my children's friends, because there is a problem here with drugs, and it might be other places too, but it's really big with the drugs here. And so even with working, I still was very involved in their friends, and my house was kind of the place because I felt more comfortable with my kids being home. And we had a swimming pool, and the kids just kind of gathered up, and I got close to the kids. But I did notice a lot of the children that went to school with my kids, their parents wasn't together. Grandparents was raising them, a big portion of them. And it's just like with my grandmother here in this area at that time. You got married. You didn't worry about, working or going to school. Your place was staying at home. And a lot of my children's friends didn't see the importance of college or even, some kind of trade. Yeah. And I tried to talk to every one of them and encourage them, because it was really hard for me to break the tradition of staying home and having one baby after another, and going to school. And mom did babysit, but she worked, and it took me 3 years to get what I should have got in 2 years, but I had to do that to work my schedule around my children's schedule. And I just didn't want my kids faced with the worry and the hardship that I had. I stressed, even my son, I stressed that, they needed their education to where that they could afford to live by themselves, and I hate to say it, I'm not downing a man in no way in saying this, but I wanted my girls to be able to be independent and not to depend on a man or anyone for that matter.
Yeah.
It was very important to me.
Okay. Are there any other, well, first let me circle back to your grandmother. What was your grandparents' names?
Hazel and Truman Mullins. They was from, Mama was from 15 Holler in McRoberts. Papa was from Beefide. Okay. And they, back then, you got married really young. I think my mama was like 15 or 16 when she got married, and she would laugh and say that she was an old maid, that, Papa had to take the sloppy fists, but he was a little bit older than her, I think maybe about 8 or 10 years. But in looking back, they had the perfect marriage. They loved each other, and he worked in the mines and provided everything and more that Mama wanted. And, the mines at that time did do good, but I don't think he made a lot of money before Bethlehem come in here and, become Union. That changed a lot, and it helped a lot. And they had 7 boys and 1 girl. My dad was the oldest son. So school wasn't big. I mean, they would pull you, at that time, they would pull you out of school to hoe the garden and harvest the crops. And, you know, when your parents isn't encouraged to go to school, you don't get encouraged to go to school.
Yeah.
Dad even told us, because there was 3 of us girls before my brother was born, and he would say, you all don't need that education. Your place is at home. Having young'uns, that's what he would call, you know, babies, young'uns. And I wanted more.
So your grandparents, that was your grandparents on your dad's side. What about your grandparents on your mom's side?
They was Lonnie and Everett Bowman from Clintwood. My grandmother's mother was full-blooded Cherokee Indian. And I learned some stuff from her as far as herbs and stuff, you know, that they treated, you know, sickness for, whatever. Like, if your baby had acne on its face or had a colicky stomach, you boiled catnip tea and, you know, give it to them. And even encourage you to mix it in your milk if you breastfed. But Papa owned his own business, and he worked side by side with his men. So
What business was that?
he was in the coal mining business. And, you know, they had their farm, and Mama pretty much run that. But they had a large family. My mother was the 15th child, and they had 20 kids, 19 pregnancies. Mama had 1 set of twins. And out of all of them, let's see, Uncle Billy got killed. He was riding a horse and got hit by lightning and died. The twins died, I think Mama said it, like 3 months. They come kind of early, so probably their heart or lungs or something wasn't developed to be able to make it. And then I think she had 1 miscarriage. She didn't say how far along she was in that. And she had 1 baby that they woke up one morning and it was dead. Probably, you know, what we have now with crib death. But Mama was, I don't know how to describe her besides just mean and hateful. She cooked 4 meals a day, and when we would stay with her, you was at the kitchen table by 5:30 in the morning eating breakfast, and, you know, lunch was served at like 11, and then dinner was served at like 3, and supper was served at like 6. I don't know, and it was all home cooked food, but I don't know if she done that because Papa come home at different times, and, you know, she just wanted to provide. And I guess with all them kids, you probably had a hit and miss on who could come and eat it at the same time. And they was very traditional in their ways. Like when the food was made, the men come to the table first and ate. The kids sat over to the side, you know, and ate, and the women ate last. And they ate whatever was left, you know. And after I got up big enough to wash dishes, it seemed like all we done was cook and wash dishes. But everything was made homemade. Like breakfast, we had what she called chocolate gravy. But it was really just chocolate pudding made a little bit more slurpy, I guess you could say. But that was so good, poured over them homemade buttermilk biscuits. And she always, you know, like in the summertime when apples was on the trees, fried apples. She had fried bacon, fried sausage, gravy, biscuits. You had fried eggs. You had scrambled eggs. She just made so much fried potatoes. I mean, that was an every morning thing. And now, you know, you have to go to the Golden Corral or somewhere to get a layout like that. I didn't go that far and fix that big a breakfast, but I did cook breakfast. And still right now, me and my husband is, the only ones home now, but I will fix breakfast sometimes for dinner because since we retired, we stay up half the night watching TV or I crochet and sew, and I'll get started doing that. And before I know it, it's wee hours of the morning. And my son and my youngest daughter lives right there at us. And I don't know if it's just where my son is very attached to me or what, but he leaves for work at 4:30 in the morning, and he always comes over to the house. So even if I go to bed, I get back up at 4, and wait for him because he would wake me up if I didn't. And he'll come through the house and he'll say, Mom, you and Dad do okay last night? And I'll say, yeah. He's happy. He goes off to work.
Where's he work?
Freedom Ford over at Wise, Virginia.
Okay.
He's the service advisor.
Okay.
He got married about 4 years ago, and he married a little girl that had went to school on and off with him from Head Start. And she works as a human resource, like she's a cleaning lady for KRCC. But I don't think they're ever going to have any grandkids. They don't seem to want any at this time. And August made 4 years of marriage. He's really big. He doesn't do any kind of drugs. He doesn't drink. We kind of, because of that being in this area so much, we kind of encouraged him to hunt and fish and have them hobbies. And he's very much into it. He killed his first deer. Let's see, he killed it in November and turned 4 in December. Gut shotted it. We had to come to the house and get more shells to put out of its misery. And the gun knocked him back and he fell down, all that good stuff. But he loves fishing and hunting. And so when he's not working and he does that, his little wife goes with him. She climbs up in the tree stand, and he bought her a gun 2 years ago. She still won't. She says the deer are pretty, and she takes pictures of all the wildlife that they see. But she come from a very bad home life. She was pretty much raised in the foster program. Her mother died when she was 11, and she really didn't know what it was like to be in a family structured home until she come into our family. Which I set her down when my son asked her to marry him. I set her down. I said, now, you're not just marrying him. You're marrying the whole family. We don't want to take your mom's place by no means, but, I will be your mama, as my son calls me. And, she calls my husband Pops. And she's just one of my children. I mean, I don't see her as a daughter-in-law. I see her, and that's tradition in here too. Mamaw Hazel and even Mamaw Bowman, they was really big in the family unity.
Okay. What about the other traditions? Was quilting a tradition in your family?
Yes. My Mamaw Bowman, she's who taught me to crochet, to sew. I remember she turned me loose with a whole box of material and this little pattern. It was called a bow tie. And she wouldn't turn me loose on her electric sewing machine. She put me on what I call the old-timey one. You had to take your feet and, pat it up and down to make it go. And I've still got the quilt. It's rags, dry rotted pretty much. But when I look at it, I kind of laugh because she just let me do it all on my own. And some of the bows was this big and some of them was this big. We had a time sewing all the blocks together because of how bad it was. And the sides of it, she had me to sew big long strips. But she was the kind of person, she showed you one time hands-on and expected you to do it. And she'd come in and check, there was no watching TV when you was at Mamaw Bowman's. You either sewed or crocheted or went up and helped Papa or, whoever was at the barn up on the hill. And we got bit by them guineas. Them was the meanest little birds I'd ever seen in my life. And it just, Cannon, she was a big part of the Cannon too. She's actually the one that showed me how to string the green beans up and make the dried beans. And that's still a tradition at Thanksgiving and Christmas for me to have that as, one of the items that we eat. I couldn't imagine Thanksgiving without shucky beans. But I guess back in her day, they didn't have electricity, and you had to dry. I mean, she dried apples. I didn't care much for them. I thought it had a different taste, but they done a lot of their food like that. I guess they didn't have but a limited amount of jars. She done the pickled corn, and it would be in the big, huge things, and they just drop the corn, down in it. I make pickled corn, but I cut it off and put it in jars. And she was the one that taught me, and it's kind of embarrassing to say this, but when you started your period, they called it the moon, or that's what my mama called it. You wasn't allowed in the garden, because if you walked in the garden, their folklore was the stuff would rot. You wasn't allowed to handle anything like in Cannon. That was the only time that you didn't have to do any of the garden work, because they said that if you canned while you was, on your menstrual cycle, that it would smell rotten. And I never tried it to know, but Mama was very headstrong on that. I mean, that's probably the maddest I've ever seen her in my life, besides her being that hateful woman that she was. But she absolutely would get the broom after you if you was in the kitchen even, at that time. It just like she would tell you, the 2 days out of the month, that was the best time to make kraut, which is cabbage, fermented. It would make it white and crunchy, and she went by them little zodiac signs. Let me think how it was. You had to do the kraut from the breast up. If you done it like in the knees, the feet, the bowels, she said that it had a bad smell to it, and it would be brown and mushy. She was very strong on, even as far as planting the garden. You had certain days that you planted in, you had certain days that you cut the grass in. Even Papa getting a haircut, she cut his hair, but she done it in some particular sign of the moon to keep his hair from growing fast. Another thing, in thinking about that, was when you're pregnant, if you cut somebody's hair, it's supposed to make it grow thicker and faster. I mean, there was a lot of folklore stuff that I learned that I didn't even realize was important. It was just a way of life. And some of it I kind of thought, was ridiculous, but you listened or you got in trouble. And when I say trouble, I mean it wasn't grounding you or not letting you go down the road. You got a whooping, and it was one you didn't soon forget.
All right. Okay, thinking about the community that you grew up in, what was it like during segregation and desegregation?
Well, for me, where I wasn't even allowed to date till I was like 16, so I stayed home a lot. There was a lot that went on that I was kind of, I wouldn't say shined from, but there was just a lot that I didn't know any part of, because I wasn't allowed to go anywhere. I wasn't allowed. We had a telephone, but the only time I got on it is if mom or dad was at Mama's and I was home and they called, for something. And if, you didn't give the phone number out for your friends to call you, there was none of that. I went to Jenkins High School, and and it always bothered me, but we rode the bus that the colored people rode, and they wasn't allowed to sit in the back with us, and we wasn't allowed to sit in the front part of the bus with them. I did play basketball my 7th grade year, and I had 2 friends that was on the ball team, and I would get in trouble just sitting where the bus, the line was of where you couldn't sit at, just for talking to my 2 friends. And I didn't know a lot or understand a lot. I just knew that was my friend, and I thought the bus driver was just being mean and ornery. But there was a lot I was sheltered from.
Yeah. Okay. What about any religious traditions, church life?
Well, my family was really big on Old Regular Baptist, and the churches around here had church once a month at each church, so you traveled, in the area, and the women sat up front on the left side, the men sat on the right side, and if you wasn't a member of that church, you sat in the back, and we wasn't allowed to speak or do anything. You went to the bathroom before you went in the church. You wasn't even allowed to get up. They was really strict on us on that. But Mama always fixed a couple covered dishes because they had dinner, after church over in the kitchen. And it was just kind of, I guess, a tradition or a way. The women didn't speak. They didn't ask questions. Like when they would sing, they would say the verse, then everybody would sing it. And they had the foot washing ceremony. I just remember going to it one time, so I'm assuming maybe it's one time a year. But that was really the only time that I seen the women having anything to do with the men, was when they washed their feet. And the women would wash each other's feet. But it was kind of, I don't know if you want to call it prejudice. The women washed the man's feet, but yet the man wasn't humble enough to wash the women's feet. That was, I guess, a tradition, if you want to call it that. But they just had that dinner cooked, and you had 2 or 3 different pots of chicken and dumplings that people had made, and their cakes. Them women back then was big on cooking everything from scratch.
Okay.
That's pretty much what I remember. We wasn't allowed to go to any other church. When I was 15, I wanted to go to Free Will Baptist because the neighbor that lived 2 houses down from us, she taught Sunday school there, and they had the vacation Bible school, and I just understood the Word of God better there. But when I started wanting to go there, I was forced to go to a regular Baptist, and, you went every Sunday, no matter how far you had to travel. I got drugged, every Sunday with my mama and papa, because I was interested in religion, but I was going in the wrong way. I don't know, I guess they thought I would have busted hell wide open or something if I'd went to Free Will Baptist. I don't know. But they was so, strong. It was about like politics in this area. When you turned 18, you didn't have a choice, or I didn't in my family, to pick. I had to register Democrat. and that's how you voted. And if you done anything different, you got in trouble with your family. It didn't matter if you was married and had a dozen kids, you still had to be Democrat. And it was kind of like that with church. In my family, you had to be a regular Baptist. You didn't have a choice. It even down to being baptized. You know, you had to go in the concrete pool of water in the back of the church, or you didn't get baptized, and you was hell bound. That was something really. I mean, the things they believed in, they was very firm and very strong on it. And if you kind of bucked against it, you was kind of shined. You know, you was like a black sheep of the family. And I don't know if they had everybody pray for you or what, but you know, it was just their way or the highway, as the old saying goes.
Okay. All right. One thing I don't think we captured at the very beginning. When were you born?
March 16th, 1966, and I didn't give my parents' name. It was Carl and Bonnie Mullins.
Okay. All right. Anything else that you can think of that you want to share?
No, besides, you know, back then, the guys was expected to go in the coal mines, and the women was expected to get married and have babies.
Yeah.
I was born in Poland. My parents immigrated to the United States back in 1982. I was almost 2 years old when they came. My dad served in the Polish military, and when he came to the United States, he also served in the United States military. We moved around quite a bit, as was customary back in the 80s and early 90s. We settled in Washington State after he got out of the service, and that's where I joined the military. Prior to joining the military, though, I was homeschooled for the majority of my schooling. I wanted to go back to a physical school, and my dad told me that the only school that he would allow me to go to was community college. And so that's what I did. I was a month away from my 15th birthday when I went to community college. I graduated on the vice president's honor roll at 17, signed up for the United States military 2 months later, and went into the Army. I was an intel analyst, was stationed at Fort Campbell, had my daughter while I was on Fort Campbell. I was 19 when she was born. Got out of the service shortly before 9/11. I was actually working on post in their computer lab on 9/11, so that was interesting because we had a commander come running up our stairs, pounding on our door, telling us we needed to turn the TV on. And I just remember standing there and watching it happen, and I felt bad because all of my friends were still on active duty, and I knew that they were going to end up being deployed. I was not recalled, thankfully, but that was it was a scary time. During that time. I ended up going back to school. I got my first bachelor's degree in radiology technology, and I spent the next 15 years working in nuclear medicine. During the time that I worked in nuclear medicine, I started off in Bowling Green working at a local hospital. Then I quit that job because I didn't agree with the way they were running the hospital and other issues. So I took a job in Arizona working for a mobile nuclear medicine imaging company, and got to travel all over the state of Arizona, and was even sent on a couple jobs in Texas and Nevada. And so that was really nice. I ended up getting laid off from that position while I was working on my second bachelor's degree, and my second bachelor's degree was in cybersecurity. So finished that. I finished let's see here. I think it was magna cum laude, I think is what I graduated with. I had really good grades at the time. But couldn't find work because I was around the time that COVID hit. And so finding work was extremely hard. I spent 3 years without a job until a friend of mine got hired on with one cybersecurity company and made a referral. And that's how I got my foot in the door as a technical writer for a cybersecurity company. I worked there for almost 3 years. They merged with another company, and last summer they did a mass layoff, over 300 employees. And I was one of the lucky ones that got laid off. So yeah, came to Neon because my husband had a friend that he'd been playing video games with for the last 15 years. And this friend lived in Whitesburg. And for 15 years, he kept saying, hey, you need to come over here and fight fire with me. And my husband just always chalked it up to, like just words that people say, he never took it seriously. And back in 23, he took it seriously and came over here to fight fire. He did one season with the Kentucky Department of Forestry, and he liked it. And then I came last year, and rest is history. Now I have my husband working for the Department of Forestry. I have my daughter, my oldest one, works for forestry as a wildland firefighter.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So that's like a whirlwind, coming through. What was your parents' names?
My dad's name is Zen, and my mom's name is Barbara.
Okay. And did they, they're coming from Poland, did they pass down, cultural traditions and...
Yes and no. So my parents were political refugees, and so they actually ran away before during the Solidarity movement in the early 80s, and they actually applied for asylum to multiple countries. The United States was the first one to offer them asylum. And when they came to the United States, they arrived in New York City, and they got an invitation to go move to the Polish community in Chicago. And as my dad always told us, he told them no, because if he wanted to live amongst Polish people and live the Polish culture, then he'd have stayed in Poland. So he tried to raise us and live the American way to the best that he knew of, from movies and things like that, what he saw other people doing. So there was still some of the communist mentality in my upbringing, and still the Polish way of doing things, but he tried his best, to be as American as he could. But there, especially around the holidays, Christmas time, that was like the biggest. Christmas and Easter were the biggest holidays that the traditions of Poland really came through.
In what way?
With the foods that we would eat, the meals, the family being together. It was always my mom, my dad, and my brother and myself. On a day-to-day basis, we always ate dinner together. There was no TV being on while we were eating. There was none of that. It was just the four of us sitting down to eat dinner together. So
okay. Was there any traditional food dishes?
Yeah. So for Christmas, my mom would always make pierogi and borscht, which is a beet soup, beet broth. Then the dinner itself was just, there wasn't really anything traditional about that. The soup was always a traditional part of it. We would just have whatever, whatever, she felt like making that year for Christmas. I think traditionally in Poland, because they're a very large Catholic country, and traditionally they eat fish on Christmas. On Christmas Eve. We always celebrate Christmas on Christmas Eve. Christmas Day, nobody cooked, nobody did anything. You were eating the leftovers and things like that from the night before. Easter, it was just your traditional ham. It was more like American, but with like the Catholic traditions. My mom would always tell us that when she was growing up, at midnight, before Easter, everybody would take their food to the church. So they would cook all day on Saturday and take their food to the church at midnight to be blessed, and then that's what they would eat on Easter. Nobody cooked anything on Easter Sunday. They just ate the food that was blessed at the church. My parents never went to church, so there wasn't any of the blessing, but my mom would cook everything the night before, the day before, and that's what we would eat the next day. So
Okay. So coming to Neon, what have you found, unexpected, different, and then what are some commonalities maybe?
I've lived in a lot of different places. So for me, Neon, you have the same type of people. The faces are different, but the personalities, if you don't look like at the surface, if you look at the commonalities, it's like people are still people. They behave and react the same way no matter where you live. I feel like Neon has the same socioeconomic issues that even larger cities have. There's still a drug problem no matter where you are, whether it's here in the United States or in Europe. You have the same problem. So I find that it's just keeping that in mind. I'm able to, interact with the people here because inherently, they're just people. So I don't know. It's not a, I guess you could say it's like there's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's just a place.
Yeah.
When I was overseas visiting family, everybody's always like, so where is it better? Is Poland better than the U.S. or is the U.S. better than Poland? And I have to tell them, you can't compare it. You can't compare it because it's like apples and oranges. They're both fruit.
Yeah.
But you can't compare.
Yeah. But what is one thing that you like the most about living here?
It's a slower way of life, and it reminds me a lot of Europe, where nobody's in a rush to do anything. We used to live in outside of Phoenix, Arizona, and it just seemed like everybody was always in a hurry to get places. Everybody had 5 million things to do during the day. Like when my kids were in school, they would talk about what their friends were doing. Their friends were, on this sports team during this fall, that sports team in the wintertime, another team, in the summertime. And then on top of all of that, they were, Phoenix, for most people don't realize, is a very large Mormon community. So then on top of that, they had all their Mormon church things that they were doing. On top of that, family things that they were doing, plus their hobbies. And it was just like everybody had every minute of their life planned out. And it felt like nobody had time for just themselves because every minute was so planned and structured. And here it's like, you have all the time in the world, but at the same time, it's also a thing that I don't like about Neon. I feel like this part of Kentucky is kind of like a place where people just kind of exist. They are just not dying. They're not living. They're just not dying right now. They're just waiting for the day that they pass on. I feel like there's just not a big push for having ambition or a drive to do better for themselves, and for me, always having had that drive, it's kind of hard for me to see a lot of times too, because I'm like, these people, they have so much potential if they just knew how to apply it, but I don't know. Like I said, it's a thing that I like about Neon, but it's also a thing that I dislike too.
Yeah. But what can you say, like, to young people today to inspire them, to show them their potential, what would you say to them?
To not give up. To not give up. Just because somebody tells you no doesn't mean that that's a final no. Never take no as an answer, because if you want something bad enough, there is a way to get it. And let me preface this with a legal way to get it. not oh, I want these pair of shoes, but I don't have the money, so I'm going to go steal them. That's not what I'm talking about. If a young person, is looking at their family life and their family life isn't the greatest, they're struggling financially, and they say to themselves, I don't want my life to be that way. I don't want my kids to have to go through what I'm going through right now. Then do something about it. You're never too young and you're never too old to start making those changes. And just because one door closes doesn't mean that there's not a hallway full of other doors to try. If that door closes, that means it wasn't your door to walk through.
Yeah. How important is this center to this neighborhood, this community?
I'm still trying to figure that out, because like I said, I'm fairly new here, but what I have seen is, they do help out the community quite a bit, with holiday meals and helping those that need work, to get back on their feet, giving people second chances. And sometimes, that having someone give them a second chance is the difference between them failing and going back to the bottom of whatever hole that they are trying to crawl out of, and actually being successful.